She stood at the counter, fingers trembling, eyes darting between the loaf of bread and the few coins in her palm. The cashier's eyes narrowed. A line formed behind her. Someone sighed loudly. And then, in a voice cracked with age and pride, she whispered, "Asterisk, can I pay you next week?" But that moment wasn't just about bread. It was about everything she had lost, and everything she was about to reclaim. This story will challenge your heart. It's raw, it's real, and it's unforgettable. Welcome to the channel. Comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe as we begin. Welcome to the channel where real stories breathe life. This one will grip your soul and stir your conscience. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and please, subscribe if you haven't already. Now, take a deep breath. The story begins. The bell above the store door gave a faint jingle as Mama Idara stepped inside, clutching a faded reusable bag to her chest like a shield. The cold hit her first, not the air-conditioned chill, but the kind that lived in silence, in the way people pretended not to notice her. The kind that wrapped itself around her every time she entered this store. She walked with the deliberate slowness of someone who knew her knees could betray her at any time. Each step carried the weight of decades. Her eyes scanned the small convenience store, landing on a discounted loaf of bread and a small bottle of milk. The essentials. She reached into her bag and fished out a worn coin purse. Her fingers, stiff and crooked from years of cleaning houses and folding laundry for strangers, counted the coins twice. Then again. The sound of each coin dropping onto her palm echoed louder than it should have. A few dimes. Some nickels. 1 quarter. It wasn't enough. Mama Idara inhaled deeply, then gathered the bread and milk with shaking hands and walked to the counter, her back straight but her heart crawling. Behind the register stood a young man. White, tall, maybe 22 at most, with a square jaw and headphones slung around his neck. His name tag read Chad. He didn't greet her. He rarely did. She placed the items on the counter, slowly, gently, as if gentleness might ease the shame growing behind her eyes. He scanned them without looking up. "That'll be $6.75. Her coins hit the counter like apologies. I only have this," she whispered. "Can I pay you next week?" Chad's gaze finally rose, sharp and unforgiving. His lips curled in quiet disbelief. "You what?" he asked, louder than necessary. The store's noise stilled. 2 customers standing nearby turned. One, a middle-aged woman in gym clothes, raised an eyebrow. The other, a bearded man holding a protein bar, stared at her with mild annoyance. "I said," Mama Idara tried again, her voice nearly invisible, "can I pay you next week? I live just a few blocks. I'm not going anywhere. Please." Chad exhaled hard, looking down at the coins as if they were trash. "This isn't a charity, lady." His words didn't slap her. They cut her, clean and deep, in places she had carefully stitched together over the years. "I worked all my life," she said, barely above a whisper, though she wasn't sure why she said it. To him? To herself? Chad turned to the side and muttered something under his breath. The gym clothes woman walked past, throwing a quick, dismissive glance her way. "Honestly," she murmured. The man behind her said, "You're holding up the line." Mama Idara stood still. Her breath caught somewhere between her throat and the memory of another time. A time in Lagos, when her students would chant greetings in unison. "Good morning, Auntie Idara." A time when respect was automatic. Here, she was invisible, until she became a burden. "Ma'am, either pay or step aside," Chad said coldly. She looked at the bread, then the milk. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. And then, someone stepped forward. A young woman, brown-skinned, bright curls bouncing under a yellow hoodie. Eyes sharp with something Mama Idara recognized. "Fire." "I've got it," the girl said, placing a $10 bill on the counter. "Ring it up." Chad gave a reluctant shrug and scanned the items. Mama Idara's hands twitched as the girl gathered the bag and offered it to her. "No," she said quickly, stepping back. "I did not ask." But you needed it. Their eyes met, and in that brief second, something passed between them, something uncomfortable and urgent. Mama Idara took the bag, silent. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking like old porcelain. She turned and walked out, her head bowed. Outside, the air was warm but unkind. She sat on a bench near the parking lot, bag beside her, heart heavy. The humiliation pressed into her like wet fabric, unseen, but suffocating. "Excuse me," a voice called behind her. She turned slowly. It was the same girl. "I'm Amina," she said. "You okay?" Mama Idara gave a slow nod. "I'm fine, thank you." "You looked like you were about to cry back there." "I do not cry in public." Amina tilted her head. "That why you wait until you get home, then?" The old woman blinked. "The nerve. I'm not a beggar. I simply asked for time." "And he acted like you asked for his soul." Mama Idara stared ahead. Amina sat beside her. "You shouldn't let people talk to you like that." "Talk to me how?" "Like you don't matter. Like your accent makes you small." The old woman smiled bitterly. "My accent makes me foreign. My skin makes me invisible. My age makes me disposable. That is the math of this country." Amina shook her head. "That's survival math. But it's not living." Mama Idara turned to her, frowning. "You think I do not know how to live? I think you forgot." The words stung deeper than the insult inside the store. "Who are you to say that to me?" Amina didn't flinch. "I'm someone who watches my mom wear the same silence. Someone who grew up too American for Nigeria and too African for America. Someone trying not to disappear between the two." The breeze carried their silence for a few seconds. "You have fire," Mama Idara said. "Fire burns, but it cannot feed you. I'd rather burn than fold." The pause. Then Mama Idara stood. "I am going now." "I'll walk with you." "I did not ask. Didn't say you had to." They walked, not speaking. The quiet was thick, but not empty. There was something unsettled in both of them now. Something brewing. They reached a small apartment complex with fading paint and cracked walkways. Mama Idara climbed the stairs slowly, the creak of every step telling a story. Her door was marked with chipped gold numbers, 2C. She opened it. The air inside was heavy with the scent of camphor, dried herbs, and faint dust. "You coming in?" she asked finally. Amina smiled softly. "If you'll let me." Inside, the apartment was clean but worn. The walls held old photographs, black and white, some faded almost to shadow. A wedding photo, proudly framed. A younger Mama Idara, beaming. A man beside her, tall, handsome, eyes kind. "Your husband?" Amina asked. "Gone. Long ago." "I'm sorry." "You are too young to be sorry for other people's lives." "No one's too young for that." Mama Idara sighed and lowered herself into a chair. "There is tea. If you want." "I'd love some." As the kettle boiled, the girl wandered. She found books, rows of them. Achebe, Baldwin, Adichie, Baldwin again. "You read all of these?" "I used to teach literature." Amina turned. "Here?" "No. Nigeria. Long ago." "Why did you leave?" "For promise. For my son. For hope." "Did the promise keep its end of the bargain?" The kettle screamed. Mama Idara didn't answer. They drank in silence. Amina looked around again and noticed something strange. An old suitcase near the closet door. Worn but not dusty. As if it had been packed, or never fully unpacked. "Why do you still keep it?" "I never meant to stay," Mama Idara said. "Every year I told myself, just one more. Then I lost count." She looked up, eyes far away. "And then one day I realized. I was too tired to go back. But too proud to admit I stayed for nothing." Amina swallowed. "There's no shame in starting over," she said. "No," Mama Idara replied. "But there is pain in realizing you don't know where home is anymore." The sun had dipped low by the time Amina stood to leave. "Thank you for the tea. And for letting me in." Mama Idara nodded. At the door, Amina hesitated. "You don't have to fight alone. You know, I have always fought alone." "Well, maybe it's time to fight different." She walked out without waiting for a reply. Mama Idara stood in the doorway long after the girl had disappeared around the corner. She looked down at the floor. The loaf of bread sat on the table, untouched. She picked up the coins still in her pocket, held them tightly. Then, in a small motion that felt much larger than it looked, she dropped them in the trash. But across town, someone else was holding something she hadn't expected, an old letter found in a library donation bin. The name on the envelope was smudged, but the handwriting clear. "To my mother, Idara." The morning air had shifted. It was subtle, the way coldness crept into July like an uninvited thought. Mama Idara sat by her window, clutching her tea as if its heat could melt the memory of yesterday's humiliation. But the shame hadn't left. It still clung to her skin, curled beneath her tongue, and sat like a stone in her chest. She hadn't touched the bread, nor the milk. She didn't want to admit it, but the girl, Amina, had unsettled her. Not just with her kindness. That was rare enough. But with her boldness. Her sharp, questioning gaze. Her refusal to bow, even slightly, to the weight of disrespect. It reminded Mama Idara of someone she used to be. Back when her voice held power in a classroom full of hungry minds. Back when she could silence a rowdy room with a glance. Back when being a black woman didn't mean being invisible. She was about to rise and make a bowl of oatmeal when the door knocked. 2 soft taps. Not urgent. Not familiar. She frowned. Another knock. She stood, slowly, joints whispering their age. Peering through the peephole, she saw the same yellow hoodie. Amina. Fin. Mama Idara opened the door, not fully. Just enough to make it clear she wasn't in the mood for long visits. "Yes." Amina didn't flinch at the coldness. She smiled anyway. "I brought breakfast. Pancakes and turkey bacon. Thought maybe you'd eat more if it didn't come with yesterday's shame." Mama Idara blinked. She didn't know whether to be offended or grateful. She opened the door wider. "Come in." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Forks clinking gently against plates. The pancakes were warm. The syrup, real maple, not the cheap stuff. Amina ate comfortably, while Mama Idara took small bites, occasionally watching the girl from the corner of her eye. "You came back," she finally said. Amina shrugged. "Something about you stayed with me. That's not always a good thing." Maybe not. But it felt unfinished. Mama Idara studied her. Unfinished. That moment. Your silence. It felt like you swallowed a story too big to hold in your throat. There was again that audacity. That way she spoke like they were equals, even though there were generations and continents between them. "You think you know me?" Mama Idara asked. "No," Amina said. "But I recognize the quiet. My mom wears it like a uniform. Proud on the outside, broken underneath. I've seen it since I was little." "Your mother is Nigerian?" Amina nodded. "Born in Ibadan. Came here before I was born. She doesn't talk about it much. She says too many things got lost in translation." Mama Idara lowered her fork. "Then maybe she and I are the same," she said. "We lost the language and the reason to use it." Amina leaned forward. "You still speak Yoruba?" "A little. When I'm alone. Or praying." "You should teach me." The old woman laughed, bitterly. "What for?" "You think it will bring back what was lost?" Amina shrugged. "Maybe not. But it might show me where I come from." There was a pause. Heavy. And then, something broke open. Mama Idara stood up, walked slowly to the bookshelf, and pulled out a slim, worn volume. A Yoruba English children's book. Yellowed pages. Handwritten notes in the margins. "This was my son's," she said, eyes distant. "He never learned to speak fluently. I thought America would teach him better things. But it only taught him how to forget me faster. The words landed like stones. Amina took the book gently, like it was sacred. Where is he now? I don't know. Amina's eyes widened. You lost touch. Mama Idara nodded slowly. He changed his number. Said he needed space. A new start. I stopped writing after the fourth letter came back unopened. Amina didn't speak. She couldn't. Mama Idara sank back into her seat, suddenly small again. You asked yesterday why I stay silent. Because silence is the only thing people don't argue with. It doesn't get misquoted. It doesn't disappoint. It doesn't forget you. But it doesn't heal either, Amina said gently. Later they walked together. The sun was high but not warm. They passed a group of teenagers skateboarding loudly. One of them glanced at them and muttered something under his breath. Something Amina didn't catch. But Mama Idara did. She stopped walking. What did he say? Amina asked. Mama Idara didn't answer. She just stood there, staring after them. Tell me. They called me African rat, she said, voice like glass. Amina turned sharply. What? It is not new. No, but it's wrong. You shouldn't just. I'm used to it. Amina's voice rose. That's not okay. You think shouting at shadows will change them? No, she said, trembling, but pretending they don't exist won't either. They stood face to face now. Heat rising between them. 2 generations. 2 ways of surviving. You think I am weak? Mama Idara said, suddenly. No, Amina replied. I think you're tired. And I think this country feeds off that tiredness. Mama Idara's lips parted, but nothing came. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked into her small kitchen and poured a glass of water. Then stood, staring at the living room. The suitcase was still there. Still packed. She opened it slowly, for the first time in years. Inside were neatly folded wrappers, old photographs, a passport, and the letter. The unopened one. Her fingers brushed over it. To my mother, she never had the courage to read it. Until now. She tore it open. Asterisk, Mama, I came to your apartment last summer. I waited. I left a note with the neighbor. I hoped you'd find me. But maybe this country made you tired of chasing. I miss your voice. If you ever want to see me, I'll be in Houston for work. I'll wait. I hope you remember what love sounds like. The date was 4 years ago. She sat down slowly, the letter in her lap. Her hands trembled. Not from age, but from something else. Regret. The next morning, she was waiting outside when Amina showed up again. You look like you didn't sleep, Amina said. I didn't, she replied. She handed the letter to her. Amina read it silently. Her jaw tightened. I want to find him, Mama Idara said, eyes shining. But I don't know where to start. I'll help you, Amina said. We'll find him together. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Not grandmother and granddaughter. Not stranger and savior. But 2 women, both trying to recover what the world told them they had no right to keep. As they walked toward the bus stop, something else happened. A man from the store, the one who had told her to stop holding up the line, was walking toward them. He didn't seem to recognize her. But Mama Idara recognized him. She stopped. He glanced up. Their eyes met. And this time, she didn't look away. She didn't bow. She didn't whisper. She stood her ground. And for a second, just a breath, he looked uncertain. Then looked down. And passed her without a word. Amina saw it. You didn't even have to speak, she whispered. Mama Idara smiled faintly. Silence can be power too. When it is no longer shame. But far away, in a quiet apartment in Houston, a man stared at an old photo on his desk. His mother, younger, regal in a white head wrap. He didn't know it yet, but she was coming. And she wasn't coming alone. The morning after her silent stare down with the man from the store, Mama Idara woke up before the sun. The world was still quiet, not yet stirred by engines, footsteps, or distant sirens. But inside her chest, something had begun to shift. There was no peace in her sleep, no comfort in her dreams. Just images, old and flickering. Her husband's voice echoing like a ghost. Her son as a small boy, running through Lagos streets with a torn backpack. Her own laughter, young, strong, unbroken. The kettle whistled before she even realized she had filled it. This morning felt different. The apartment smelled faintly of ginger and dust. The thin curtains let in streaks of early light, soft and golden. The small living room was neat but tired, worn rugs, faded cushions, a coffee table with 3 legs and one wobbling on a stack of old magazines. On the wall above the couch hung a picture that had never been taken down, her wedding day in Ibadan, 1976. She had been radiant, wrapped in white lace and coral beads, her smile stubbornly wide, like someone daring the world to challenge her happiness. Her husband, Io, stood tall beside her, his eyes calm, proud. His death had left a wound no time could fully dress. Now only memories whispered his name. A soft knock broke the silence. She opened the door to find Amina, again. This time with no breakfast. No apology. Just a small notebook in her hand and a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. "I want to learn Yoruba," she said plainly. Mama Idara arched a brow. "Today?" "Just now." "And what has made you so stubborn about this language?" "I was raised in a home where my mother swallowed her accent every time we had company, where speaking Yoruba meant shame. Now I want to speak it loud. I want to know what she left behind so I can find what she kept buried." The room felt smaller suddenly, more honest. Mama Idara sighed and stepped aside. "Come in then. But I warn you, I am a strict teacher." "I like strict," Amina said, grinning. "You say that now." They sat on the living room floor, cross-legged. A notebook between them. Mama Idara began slowly, deliberately. *E Quero * means good morning. Say it. Quero? *E Quero * say it with the heart, not the tongue. E Quero. Better. They repeated phrases for an hour, pausing only when laughter interrupted their progress. Amina stumbled through tones, and Mama Idara's patience softened with each correction. It wasn't just a lesson. It was an offering. But eventually, Amina asked the question neither of them had fully prepared for. "Why didn't you teach your son? Why didn't he grow up knowing all this?" Mama Idara looked away. The sunlight hit her face just enough to show the line of a single tear. "Because I thought erasing part of me would help him survive." She stood slowly and walked toward a door Amina had never noticed before. It was tucked at the back of the apartment, half blocked by a standing lamp. "This room," Mama Idara whispered, "I haven't opened it in years." She pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, cold in the way closed rooms get. The curtains were drawn, the bed neatly made. Books stacked on the desk. A pair of tiny sneakers beside the bookshelf. Dust clung to everything. A child's room. Preserved. Forgotten. "This was his," Mama Idara said. "My son's." Amina stepped in carefully, like entering a church. She picked up a storybook from the desk, * The Lion and the Clever Tortoise Star. Flipping through it, she found a drawing on the back page. A stick figure boy holding hands with a woman in a long dress. Above them, written in block letters, "Mummy plus me." Mama Idara remained at the doorway, stiff. "He used to wait by the window every day. Said he wanted to count how many buses passed by before I came home from work. He never made it past 3. Her voice cracked. "I used to promise him, just one more shift, then I'll read to you." But the shifts piled up. The reading didn't. Amina placed the book down. Her eyes were glassy. "Do you regret coming here?" she asked. "I regret who I became trying to stay." They sat on the edge of the bed. The silence between them no longer heavy, but sacred. Amina whispered, "What was his name?" Obesai. It means, in the hands of the Father. And where is he now? I don't know, Mama Idara said quietly. I stopped knowing when he stopped needing me. They were quiet again, until the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Startled, Mama Idara rose. Amina followed. She opened the door, and there stood a middle-aged black woman, well-dressed, clutching a leather folder. Mrs. Idara? The woman asked. Yes. I'm from the Houston Public Library. My name is Carla. We received a donation of books last week. One of them had a letter inside, addressed to you. She reached into her folder and pulled out a plastic sleeve. Amina stepped closer. It was the same letter. The one Mama Idara had opened just the night before. Confused, she looked at the woman. We traced it back to a community book drive your son was involved with 4 years ago, Carla explained. He helped organize donations. That letter was tucked inside a book by mistake, I believe. I'm sorry it took so long to get to you. We only just found your address. Mama Idara took the sleeve with trembling hands. Did you meet him? She asked. Carla nodded. Briefly. Kind man. Quiet. Always carried a camera. A camera. Obesai loved pictures. Mama Idara's voice came out like a whisper. Do you know where he is now? Carla checked her notes. He moved to Austin. Works as a photographer now. We may have a contact for his agent. She handed over a card, then paused. You're lucky, ma'am. He talked about you during the book drive. Said he hoped you'd find that letter one day. Tears welled in Mama Idara's eyes. She clutched the card to her chest, whispering thank you over and over. That night, she sat with Amina at the dining table. A candle flickered between them. The old storybook sat nearby. Amina finally said, You should go. To Austin. I will, Mama Idara replied. But not alone. Amina smiled. Then let's go together. Later, alone, Mama Idara entered her son's room again. This time she sat on the floor. She opened the storybook and read aloud. The lion roared and roared, but the tortoise was clever. Her voice quivered, but she kept going. She read until the end. And then she said softly, I remember, Baysai. I remember everything now. Across the city, a man sat at his desk editing a photo of a sunset over a lake. He paused. Something stirred in him. He turned and looked at a photograph pinned to the corkboard beside his lamp. A smiling woman in a head wrap, holding a baby. He didn't know it yet, but the woman in that photo was on her way back to him. And she wasn't coming as a shadow of her past. She was coming whole. It had been 4 days since the incident at the corner store. 4 days since Mama Yemi's voice cracked like fragile glass in front of strangers, asking if she could pay for bread next week. 4 days since that humiliating whisper echoed through her soul. And yet, it stayed with her, haunting, lingering, gnawing at her pride like rust on metal. But something shifted in those days too. She hadn't left her apartment much, just to pick up the prescription she could no longer afford and to drop by the community center where Ms. Harper worked. It was Ms. Harper who sat across from her with her kind but assertive voice and offered, gently, You're allowed to ask for help, Mama Yemi. Even strong women bleed sometimes. But Mama Yemi didn't bleed where others could see. She bled inside. That morning, she woke up before the sun and brewed the last of her Lipton tea. The bag had already been used twice, but she still dipped it gently, like it was new. Outside her window, the early fog rolled over the cracked sidewalks of South Shore, and the street was empty except for a teenager dragging a garbage can across the pavement. Mama Yemi sat by the window, her eyes distant. She held a photograph in her lap, her late husband, Emmanuel, beaming in his Ankara outfit, and beside him, their only son, Nobina. That photo was all that remained of a home she once had, a country she once knew, a self she once recognized. But here in America, everything had a price, even dignity. And today, she had decided to walk into that price. She pinned her scarf tightly, pulled her worn shawl around her shoulders, and stepped into the cool morning. She took the long way to the local school, passing the same bench where she used to wait for the bus to work. The paint had chipped. The posters had changed. But the ache remained the same. At the school gates, children were flooding in, zipping coats, swinging backpacks, shouting over one another in a flurry of youth. But Mama Yemi wasn't here for them. She was here for the woman who stood by the front doors, the one who looked like every teacher in America. Clipboard in hand, glasses too big for her nose, and a face that always seemed stretched tight with impatience. Miss Croft, the same woman who, 3 days ago, had told Yemi's niece not to speak Yoruba during recess because it wasn't appropriate. The memory burned like fire in Mama Yemi's throat. 10-year-old Ife had come home crying that day. Crying because her mother tongue, her birthright, had been called disruptive. Crying because her name had been mocked in the lunchroom. Crying because she was being taught to be ashamed. Mama Yemi hadn't said anything that day. She had simply hugged Ife and held her close, but her silence was not surrender. It was a storm waiting to break. And today, it did. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the morning chatter as she approached Miss Croft. The teacher turned. Recognition flickered in her eyes, then settled into mild discomfort. "Oh, hello," she said. "My name is Mama Yemi," the older woman replied, calm but clear. "Ife is my niece." Miss Croft nodded. "Yes, she's a sweet girl." Sweet but ashamed now, because someone told her that the language of her grandmother was not welcome here. There was a pause, a shift in the air. Well, I didn't mean it that way," Miss Croft began, adjusting her clipboard. "It's just that during recess, we encourage the children to speak English so that everyone can understand. Do you encourage them to forget who they are?" Yemi interrupted. "Do you encourage them to erase their history?" Miss Croft opened her mouth, then closed it. Around them, the stream of students began to thin. "You think it's just language," Yemi said softly. "But it is identity. It is roots. It is the soil we grow from. Without it, what is left? Leaves in the wind." The teacher's face flushed. "I didn't mean to offend anyone." "But you did." Silence. And in that silence, something cracked, not in anger, but in understanding. Because Miss Croft didn't look like someone who meant harm. She looked like someone who never had to think about it. Mama Yemi exhaled. She had made her point. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her head high and steps firm. Behind her, Miss Croft stood still, staring down at her clipboard like it suddenly held secrets she wasn't ready for. Later that evening, Yemi sat by the kitchen table with Ife. The girl nibbled at dry crackers while scribbling in a workbook. Suddenly, she looked up. "Annie, are you mad at my teacher?" Yemi smiled faintly. "No, I'm mad at silence. But I spoke today. For us." Ife blinked, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded paper. "We're supposed to write a poem for Culture Day next week," she said. "Can I write it in Yoruba?" The question struck Yemi like a soft gust of wind, gentle yet stirring. "Yes," she said, placing her hand over Ife's. "And I will help you." That night they wrote together. Under the dim bulb in their kitchen, the old woman and the young girl brought life to verses laced with memory, pride, and rhythm. But not everything in the world could be healed with words. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a notice. Her rent had increased. Effective next month. She held the letter in her hands, fingers trembling, not from fear, but fury. Because she knew what this meant. She had already been skipping meals. Already choosing between light bills and medications. There was no room left to shrink. That night, she sat by the window again, her eyes on the flickering street lamp, her mind circling an impossible question. What else can they take before I disappear? Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mama Yemi, I got your number from Ms. Harper. I run a grassroots documentary project about immigrant stories. Someone told me what happened at the store. I'd like to talk to you, if you're willing. She read it again. Then again. For a long time, she said nothing. But slowly, her lips curved, not into a smile, but into a line of decision. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let the world hear her voice. Not in whispers, but in echoes. And yet, as she stared at the message, her door creaked. A noise in the hallway. Then, 3 knocks. From unfamiliar. She froze. Was it the landlord? A stranger? Another letter in a different form? Her heart pounded, slow but deep. The knock came again. Mama Yemi stood, crossed the room, and reached for the doorknob. Then she paused, and the screen faded to black. It was a cold Wednesday morning, one of those days where the sky looked bruised and the wind cut straight through coats. Adiz had risen early, slipping out of the apartment quietly so as not to wake Miles. He'd been up late again, typing away at job applications while pretending it didn't break him a little more each time the responses never came. Her feet ached by the time she got to the local grocery store, a small place with a blinking, open sign and rows of unfamiliar brands that never smelled or tasted like home. Adiz pushed the door open, her fingers stiff and red from the cold. A soft bell jingled overhead. No one greeted her. It wasn't the kind of store that made space for warmth. Inside, the store owner stood behind the counter like a sentinel. White, mid-50s, arms crossed over his belly, watching every move she made. She had seen that look too many times. The look that asked silently, asterisk, "What are you doing here?" She wandered the aisles carefully. Every step felt like it echoed. Her eyes scanned the prices. Even the basics seemed to mock her. Eggs. Bread. Toothpaste. She clutched her small purse tighter, knowing exactly what lived inside it. Only a few coins and a crumpled $5 bill. Miles needed lunch for his volunteering. They were almost out of rice. And her shoes, the soles were giving way. She picked up a loaf of bread and a small bottle of milk, her fingers trembling slightly. She moved toward the counter like someone approaching judgment. The man barely looked at her before ringing it up. $6.70, he said flatly. Adiz opened her purse and began placing her coins down one by one. The clinking felt too loud. A nickel rolled slightly and stopped at the edge of the counter. The silence thickened as the man waited. She placed the $5 bill beside the coins and gave a tight, apologetic smile. "I don't have the rest," she said quietly, "but I live just around the block. I come here all the time. I'll bring the rest by tomorrow or Friday at the latest. Can I pay you next week?" The man leaned back, his eyes narrowing, face unreadable. "You think this is charity?" he asked. "No, sir. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." He studied her, then looked behind her at the line that had formed without her noticing. A white woman in a beige coat with a toddler, an old man with a 6-pack of beer, a younger man with AirPods and energy drinks. All eyes seemed to lock on her. She could feel the heat rising in her face, even though the cold from outside still clung to her coat. Shame was a strange thing. It didn't shout. It burned quietly under the skin. "I'm not running a tab for anyone," the man said, pushing the items aside. "Come back when you have the full amount." The world swayed a little. She nodded slowly, biting down on her pride until her jaw hurt. Understood. She turned to leave. Behind her, someone muttered, "They always try that." She didn't look back to see who said it. She just pushed the door open and walked into the freezing air. By the time she reached the apartment, her hands were empty and her heart felt heavy. She sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, willing herself not to cry. But the silence made it worse. Silence had a way of letting everything echo louder inside your soul. Miles emerged from the small bathroom, rubbing his eyes. "You're back early." She nodded. "Didn't have enough." He walked to her, sat beside her. "You okay?" She tried to smile. "I'll go again tomorrow. Maybe we'll have enough by then." He placed a hand on hers. "We'll be fine." But his words didn't hold much weight anymore. Not because they were lies, but because hope, like food, was something you had to keep replenishing, and theirs was running low. Later that afternoon, she sat at the park across from the city library, watching the pigeons peck at old fries scattered on the pavement. Two white women walked past her, laughing, their coats clean, their hair blowing in the wind. One of them looked at Adiz briefly, and then looked away as if she hadn't seen her at all. Adiz remembered her mother's voice in moments like these. You are not less. You are not small. Your dignity is not negotiable. But how do you hold on to dignity when the world insists you prove your worth just to be treated human? She heard from Mama Igioma later that evening. The call came through WhatsApp. My daughter, the old woman's voice croaked with affection and worry. I had a dream about you. A troubling one. Is everything all right over there? Adiz bit back tears. She couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't say that she just begged to pay for bread later and been turned away like a beggar. Yes, Mama. Things are hard, but we're managing. Miles is still looking. There was a pause. And you? Are you praying? Are you remembering who you are? Adiz let out a long breath. Some days I forget. But I'm trying. You must not forget, Mama Igioma said gently. America is not your name. Remember where you came from, Adiz. You carry more than their silence can steal. They talked a little longer, the conversation drifting between home, stories from the village, and shared laughter that warmed her more than any heater ever could. But the next morning brought a different kind of storm. Adiz had gone back to the store, cash in hand. She wanted to show she wasn't what they thought she was. That she kept her word. That she wasn't one of those. As she walked in, the same man was behind the counter. She placed the money down gently, along with a little extra. For yesterday, she said, and thank you for your patience. He stared at the money, then back at her. You people always act like you're owed something. She blinked. Excuse me? You think you can come here, push your way in, ask for favors like you're special? I've seen your type. You act like victims, but you're just lazy. You want a handout? Go somewhere else. The words didn't just hit her, they pierced. All the memories rushed back, being followed in department stores, the microaggressions at the daycare job she had lost, the time a woman clutched her purse when Adiz walked by, the teacher who once asked if she could speak English well enough. The 1,000 paper cuts of daily racism, wrapped in smiles, folded in condescension. She stared at the man, her voice stuck. Her eyes welled with quiet rage. And then, something in her snapped. No, she said, voice low but firm. You don't get to define me. I'm not lazy. I'm not looking for pity. I came back to pay because I have honor. Something you clearly know nothing about. The man looked stunned. She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked out, this time not with shame, but with fire in her bones. That evening, she sat at the bus stop, eyes closed, listening to the wind and traffic. She had no idea what came next. The job interviews weren't panning out. Miles was getting more withdrawn. Rent was due in a week. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a ghost in this city. She had spoken up. She had said no, and even if the world didn't applaud it, her ancestors did. She felt it in her spine, in her bones, in her name. Adiz, daughter of strength. She was not invisible. She would not be erased. And this was not the end. The bus screeched to a halt. The sound alone made Mama Jora wince. Her knuckles were stiff as she gripped the plastic shopping bag resting on her lap, empty now, except for a bottle of off-brand lotion and a jar of discount peanut butter. No meat, no rice, no vegetables. She had weighed each item against her dwindling dollars, each decision echoing with shame. People filed off the bus around her. Some glanced. Most didn't. One teenager brushed past, muttering under his breath. Something about how she smelled. Something about how she always rode this route. She waited until everyone was off before slowly rising. Her knees creaked like tired wood. Outside, The wind struck her scarf with rude force, nearly blowing it off. Her feet shuffled along the sidewalk of Jefferson Avenue, that long street where glass from liquor stores twinkled like fallen stars and corner boys shouted into their phones as if the world owed them attention. This was not her Africa. This was not the land of warm greetings and slow mornings. This was not the sweet market in Owerri where mangoes were picked ripe, where neighbors watched each other's children, and your name was something you earned, not something they butchered on purpose. And yet, this was now her home. She adjusted her scarf and walked on. Across the street, a white woman exited a yoga studio. Blonde, taut, laughter too loud. She was greeted by her friend with a kiss on both cheeks. Mama Jora looked away quickly. That kind of softness had never been available to her, not in America. It was after sunset when she finally reached the apartment. Her legs were heavy, but her heart felt heavier. She paused at the metal front door. The buzz code never worked. She waited until someone else came, slipping in before the door slammed shut. She hated that part. Every day, she felt like she was sneaking into her own life. When she reached her floor, she found it again, the mail tossed in front of her door like litter. The envelope was there too, the one marked final notice. She picked it up, hand shaking. Inside the apartment, her world was one of silence and shadows. The heater clanged in protest. Her kettle coughed steam, then went quiet. She boiled the water anyway, for a single sachet of tea she had reused twice already. She sat, opened the letter, and wept. The eviction deadline was now 8 days away. The food bank had already refused her last week, said she'd reached the monthly limit. Her benefits had been delayed again. Her cleaning hours were cut without warning. One of the white tenants in the building had complained about someone foreign being too slow with the trash pickups. She hadn't told her daughter. Amma wouldn't understand. Amma lived in another city now, had a sleek condo, a mixed-race boyfriend, and a promotion at her marketing job. She rarely called. And when she did, her voice was sharp, impatient. Always urging Mama to apply for better jobs or stop acting like a victim. They weren't close anymore. They didn't know each other anymore. Mama Jora placed the letter down. She walked to the window. Her reflection stared back. A woman still wearing her pride like a scarf too thin for winter. A woman whose accent betrayed her before she even finished saying hello. She thought of her old home. The market square. The wooden bench her husband built before he passed. The mango tree in their backyard. Then she thought of what that same land had taken from her. Her body, her youth, her sense of safety. Her pain didn't start in America. But America had deepened it. The next morning, she walked into the corner store. Same place. Same man behind the counter. White, aging, arms covered in blurry tattoos. Face like he hated everything. She placed a can of beans and a loaf of bread on the counter. He looked at her like she was dirt beneath his boot. "That all?" he asked. She nodded. She opened her palms slowly. The coins inside shook like leaves in the wind. "I'll bring the rest next week," she whispered. He didn't move. Didn't blink. "You do this again," he growled, "I'll ban you." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Someone behind her scoffed. A young white woman. She made a disgusted noise and whispered something about these people. Mama Jora turned around. Something in her broke. "I said I will pay," she said again. Her voice cracked. But there was steel underneath now. The store owner grumbled but waved his hand. "Go," he spat. "Next week." She took the bag slowly, then turned and walked out, head held a little higher. Outside, the wind bit at her again. But this time, she didn't flinch. The news traveled fast, how she had begged for food in the store. She overheard neighbors whispering. Someone on her floor said she was too old to be struggling like that, and probably faking it for sympathy. That evening, she sat in her room, lights off, listening to the radiator breathe. And then her phone rang. It was Amma. Mama Jora didn't speak right away. Amma sighed loudly. "I heard what happened at the store." Why are you always embarrassing yourself? I didn't beg. Same thing. Why not just ask me for help instead of acting like this? You wouldn't understand. Of course, I understand, Mama. You choose to be poor. You don't even try. You don't network. You don't. I don't know how to be American, Mama Jorah said quietly. Silence. Then the call ended. Later that night, she sat alone. She watched old videos tapes from back home. Amma as a child, her husband laughing, dusty roads, palm trees swaying. In those frames, she was someone else. A woman with laughter. With beauty. With purpose. She whispered something in Igbo under her breath. The prayer. A memory. A grief she had never shared aloud. Her phone vibrated. A message. From a woman in the building, Latoya, the single mother from the second floor. It simply read, Heard what happened. I've been there too. If you ever need help, come by. No shame in needing someone. Mama Jorah stared at the screen. Then slowly she smiled. Just a little. The next day, she went outside earlier than usual. The sun was bright. The streets were louder than normal. But something in her was different. She passed the store. The same man behind the counter looked up, wary. She kept walking. She passed the church. Heard music inside. Her feet paused, but not from fear this time. She stepped in. The pastor, a tall black woman with dreadlocks, was rehearsing with the choir. When she saw Mama Jorah, she waved gently. You here for the food pantry? She asked. Mama Jorah hesitated. Then nodded. You don't need to explain anything, the pastor said. Just come inside. The sunlight was sharp that morning, slicing through the smoggy haze of the downtown streets. Myra stood at the corner across from the supermarket, her fingers tight around her purse strap. She wasn't just thinking about groceries. She was thinking about how she'd let herself believe that people could change. It had been 3 days since the church incident, 3 days since Sister Agnes had publicly questioned her citizenship, her faith, and her integrity in front of people she once called her spiritual family. No one stood up for her. Not even Pastor Ray. The silence rang louder than the slur that slipped from Agnes's mouth. Her world had been stripped of the last safe place it held. But today, Myra was on a mission. Not of vengeance, but of clarity, and maybe to peace. She crossed the street with measured steps, ignoring the teenage boy who muttered under his breath as he passed. She clutched the worn envelope in her purse. The one with the application for a vendor's permit, one step closer to finally opening her small spice and herb stall. A dream she tucked away after George died. But she was ready to dream again. She pushed open the supermarket door. The chime jingled. The store owner, Mr. Harlow, was behind the counter. The same man who once offered her expired bread as charity, smirking like he was doing her a favor. His eyes scanned her like a metal detector, seeking fault before kindness. You again, he muttered. Back to ask for more free food? Myra didn't flinch. Her voice came out steady. No. I came to pay what I owe. She reached into her purse and laid the coins and bills she'd gathered, one by one, on the counter. It wasn't much, but it covered the loaf of bread and the can of milk she'd pleaded for last week. Harlow stared at the money, then at her. What's this for? For dignity, she answered, and to remind myself I still have it. He scoffed and looked away, but she didn't. She walked out slowly, chin high, the air suddenly easier to breathe. Outside, her phone buzzed. A message from Zora. Mama, call me. It's important. Her heart jumped. She found a quiet spot beside the bus stop and dialed. Zora's voice came through, shaken. Mama, I posted your story. That day at the store. I filmed it, remember? I didn't mean to share it at first, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. People need to see how they treat you. How they treat women like you. Myra's mouth went dry. You filmed that? Yes. And Mama, it's gone viral. Almost 1 million views. You need to see the comments. People are angry. They're talking about injustice, racism, dignity. You're giving people hope. Myra sat slowly, stunned. Her hands trembled. Not from fear. From something new. Recognition. Later that afternoon, Myra sat at her small kitchen table, Zora beside her, laptop open. The screen glowed with a video titled, Asterisk, Can I Pay You Next Week? Dignity in a Racist World. It showed Myra's trembling hand holding those few coins. Her quiet, proud voice. Her walk away from that store. But the video also had context. Zora had included snippets of Myra's story, the immigration battles, the microaggressions, the church betrayal. The comment section was a flood of empathy, rage, and support. Someone had even started a GoFundMe titled, Help Myra Start Her Herb Stall. Donations were pouring in. Myra wept. But not the way she had in the back of that church or on the floor of her apartment. These tears were full of something else. Healing. Days passed. Then weeks. The little stall became a corner of culture, draped in Nigerian fabric, with jars of turmeric, cloves, dried ugu leaves, pepper soup spice, and things Myra could name in both English and Yoruba. Customers came not just to buy, but to listen, to learn. Myra's story had started something bigger. But not everyone was pleased. One morning, as she opened shop, she found a note under the canopy. Go back to where you came from. The words were scrawled in red. Zora was furious. Mama, we should call the police. No, Myra said. Let them write their fears. I'll keep planting roots. One Sunday, weeks later, Myra was invited to speak at a community storytelling event. She stood on a simple stage under a modest spotlight. Faces stared back. Black, white, brown, old, young. She began softly. I used to walk with my head down. Not because I was ashamed of where I came from, but because I thought the world had no place for it. I was wrong. She spoke of isolation, of identity, of faith shattered and reformed. She shared the pain of being othered and the joy of being seen. When she finished, a young white woman stood up from the crowd. My mother, she's from Ghana. She doesn't speak much. But watching your video, she cried for the first time in years. Thank you. Then came another voice. An elderly black man in a wheelchair. Been here 60 years. Never seen someone speak that truth out loud the way you just did. God bless you, sister. Myra smiled gently, tears slipping free. Maybe the world is starting to listen. In the quiet of her room that night, Myra lit a single candle. Not out of ritual, but reverence. She stared at its flame. So many nights she'd sat in this room, wondering if she mattered. If her story was worth telling. If her life, full of hardship and humble beginnings, held anything of value to a world that spoke a different language of worth. Now she knew. Her story wasn't just survival. It was resistance. It was healing. It was a reminder, to others like her, to those still bent under the weight of being unseen, that they, too, have the right to speak, to take up space, and to stay. Her phone buzzed again. Zora had posted something new. A quote from Myra's speech over a photo of her stall. I am not a shadow. I am the sun. You just looked away too long. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful journeys that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of hope and strength. Join our community. Your support means everything.